Inflation is still at an all-time high. As of April 2022, the annual inflation rate for the United States is 8.3%, a 40-year high. And consumers and businesses are feeling it across all sectors. Gasoline prices are at some places $6 a gallon. Food is 10% more expensive than a year ago, and plane ticket prices are at a ridiculous level. So what is going on? Why is inflation continuously rising, and what can we do about it? Hi, if you're new to the channel, my name is Tay from Financial Tortoise, where we learn to grow our wealth slow and steady. In today's video, we're going to tackle inflation. And this video is broken into 3 parts, so feel free to skip around to the sections you would find most useful. First, for those of you who might be new to the concept of inflation, I'll share with you some fundamentals around what inflation is and then why we're even talking about it today. Second, we'll take a stab at trying to understand what's driving the current inflation craze. And third, most importantly, I want to share with you 5 specific recommendations as regards to how you can respond to these high inflation times. Alright, but first, for those of you who might not be too familiar with this concept, what is inflation? In a nutshell, inflation is a rate that the cost of products and services increase over time, essentially lowering the value of the money that you have today. I remember watching Jurassic Park, the original one in theaters in 1993. I was in elementary school and it was one of the coolest experiences in my life. My friend's dad was kind enough to pay for our tickets. I distinctly remember it costing $3 per kid. And for a 3rd grader with no money, $3 was a lot of money. Fast forward to today, the latest Jurassic Park movie, The Jurassic World Dominion, is planned to be released in theaters this summer, and if we were to watch this in the theaters, it would cost us more than $10 per person. I may not be as generous as my friend's dad when paying for my kid and his friends. In a period of 30 years, movie ticket prices have tripled in cost, and this is what is called inflation. In the United States, the most famous and widely used indicator for inflation is the Consumer Price Index, also known as CPI. This measures the change in prices paid by the consumers for goods and services. It does this by measuring the price of an item in one period compared to its price in the previous period. For example, what is the price of eggs right now compared to the same time period last year or the year before? But the bottom line is that inflation erodes purchasing power over time. With inflation, your dollar tomorrow will not go as far as it does today. But inflation isn't necessarily a bad thing. And inflation isn't anything new. We have seen it every single year consistently since the beginning of time. That is why the movie ticket that cost $3 in 1993 now costs over $10 today. And why a cup of coffee that used to cost a quarter 50 years ago now costs on average $2 today. And for the past several decades, inflation has been quite steady, around 2 to 4%. And when it remains this moderate, it's actually a good thing for the economy. Moderate inflation is actually a sign of a healthy economy. When the economy grows, demand for items increase. And this increase in demand pushes prices a little higher as suppliers create more items that consumers and businesses want to purchase. Workers benefit because from the increase in demand for labor, their wages likely increase. And with higher wages, these workers can go out and purchase more items, thus creating a virtuous cycle of healthy supply and demand. Inflation itself isn't causing this, rather a moderate inflation is a reflection of this healthy growing economy. However, when it starts to push beyond this normal range of 2 to 4% and runs at 5%, 6% or higher, it can be bad for the economy. Just to give you context, the last time we had inflation this high was 40 years ago when Ronald Reagan was the president. When it's this high, essential goods become unaffordable, especially for the average consumer whose paychecks aren't rising as quickly as inflation. Basic needs like food and gasoline becomes harder and harder to afford. Economy slows down, less items being sold, less items being created by suppliers, and less demand for labor. Companies also not only need to deal with lesser demand, but also higher costs of production on their end. Costs of key parts like machinery or microchips are more expensive than before. Layer this on top of less demand from consumers, they might need to cut back their production or worse yet, declare bankruptcy. So what is causing the current high inflation to a record level of 8.3%? There are 2 primary factors that I'd like to highlight here. One is just basic demand and supply. As countries emerged from the COVID lockdown, shops opened and people jumped at the opportunity to go out and buy stuff with the money saved. In essence, driving extraordinary demand for goods. However, it took a while for suppliers to be able to meet the increased demand. When demand is greater than supply, you either get shortage or price increases. In this case, we got a little bit of both, thus pushed a lot of the prices up, driving higher and higher inflation. The second contributing factor is the war in Ukraine. Not only is the war in Ukraine having a tragic humanitarian consequences, there is also an economic consequence, specifically on commodities. The war in Ukraine has dealt a major shock to the commodities market, altering global patterns of trade, production, and consumption. According to the World Bank, the increase in energy prices over the past 2 years has been the largest since 1973 oil crisis. Price increases for food commodities, of which Russia and Ukraine are the largest producers, and fertilizers, which rely on natural gas as a production input, have been the largest since 2008. And the result of all these increases in commodity prices has fed through the economy, causing higher inflation. So the big question is, what should we do? How can we effectively manage high inflation? The Federal Reserve is increasing their interest rate in order to combat rising inflation. And the hope is that they can successfully do this without putting the whole economy in a recession. However, we don't want to just depend on Jerome Powell to get us through these hard times. There are things that we can do, and I want to share with you 5 recommendations. First is to continuously invest in stocks. Stocks are naturally a good inflation hedge. When we own stocks, we're essentially owning a piece of business. Well-known and profitable businesses like Apple, Disney, and Nike. And all these businesses have valuable assets and create amazing products. And the value of these assets and products naturally rise with inflation because these companies need to remain profitable. Thus, when we invest in stocks, inflation hedge is already built in. And in my opinion, the best way to be invested in stocks is through low-cost, well-diversified index funds like Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund, VTSAX, not individual stocks or actively managed funds. Through this one index fund, you're essentially owning a piece of every publicly traded company in the United States, like the ones I mentioned earlier, Apple, Disney, Nike, and thousands more. So if we want our money to stay ahead of rising inflation, continue to invest in stocks, and more specifically, well-diversified index funds like Vanguard's Total Stock Market Index Fund. My second recommendation is to maintain good cash reserve. I know this may sound counterproductive against rising inflation. However, hear me out. Yes, cash is one of the hardest hit categories during high inflation. A dollar today is worth less tomorrow. Thus, the rationale for most people is to find inflation-beating assets and move all your money into those assets. However, these are uncertain times and we don't know what the future will hold. Yes, is the Federal Reserve trying to lower inflation without kicking off a full-out recession? Of course. However, historically, recession has most often followed increased interest rates, and we can't just pin all our hopes on hope, crossing our fingers that the market and the economy will stay intact while inflation decreases. And the best tool against uncertainty is always cold, hard cash. Cash acts as your shield against uncertainty. Cash provides you a soft cushion in case you fall. And cash keeps you in the game without completely knocking you out. It may be painful to watch your cash lose value just as it sits in the bank account. However, don't look at money as something that must always be growing. It is still working for us even when it remains liquid cash sitting in our bank account, working to give us a peace of mind and working to give us that cushion if something were to come up. Ideally, I like to keep at least 6 months of expenses in cash in the bank account at all times. Sometimes, when things seem really uncertain, even 12 months. Hold a good pile of cash and have a peace of mind. The third recommendation is to lock in your interest rate for your home mortgage. I know mortgage rates have increased in comparison to the last few years, but when we compare historical rates, it is actually still a good rate. 15 years ago, the average 30-year mortgage interest rate was 6%, and that was considered the lowest in history. You wind the clock back a bit more, 30 years ago, the mortgage interest rates averaged 9 to 10%. We tend to only remember recent events, but it's good to step back once in a while and get a broader perspective to appreciate our current situation. And housing is most often the biggest expense in many households' budget. So in times of high inflation, if you can lock in your mortgage payment with a good fixed rate, it acts as a natural discount against rising inflation. One alarming trend that I want to call out is that currently with increasing home value, many people are cashing out on their equities, and some with hopes that they can make more money in other assets. Home equity loans aren't necessarily a bad thing, but I would recommend thinking really hard before taking them, especially during these times when the real estate market has increased in value as quickly as it did. We just don't know what the future holds as regards to the economy and its ripple effect on the real estate market. So take caution and tread carefully. Number 4 recommendation in these times of high inflation is to reassess your budget, especially in categories most impacted by inflation. The overall inflation is listed at 8.3% right now, but there's a lot of variability across different sectors. The sectors most hardest hit are gasoline at 48%, used vehicles at 35%, hotel rooms at 29%, and airfare at 24%. It might be worthwhile to look at alternate means of transportation if the rising gas prices are hitting your budget really hard. Maybe public transportation, or even carpooling. My wife and I did this for many years, and not only was it good for our wallet, but for our marriage as well. When our kids were super young, it felt like the only time we had to talk was during our drives. And with high hotel room and airline costs, it might be worthwhile to look at alternate ways to vacation this summer. Maybe trying out that camping site that you've been thinking about, or visiting the local beach instead of flying somewhere. We can't do much about many of these rising prices, but we have control over how we can respond. We have a lot more control than we give ourselves credit for, so reassess your budget to see where inflation can have a lesser impact on your overall spending. Number 5 recommendation is to invest in yourself. You're probably like, what does that have to do with inflation? Well, this again comes with the theme of uncertainty that comes with high inflation. Despite the shaky market and high inflation, unemployment is at the lowest it's ever been. As of April, 3.6%. Companies are struggling to not only fill vacant positions, but retain their workers. It's an employee market, and you can have your pick of the lot in the job that you want. So this is a great time to make that shift into the job or career that you always wanted. Again, we don't know what the future holds. Things can quickly turn, and companies may start to tighten their belts again. Invest in yourself and double down on your career path so you have a more secure employment in the future. Or start to reinvent yourself now so you're ready for a new career path. And this advice is always true regardless of high inflation or uncertain economy. Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, actually founded his shoe company on nights and weekends, selling Japanese imported running shoes from the back of his car while working full-time as a public accountant. We should always be investing in ourselves because life is too short and we never know what the future holds. And if you've been thinking about a career shift, check out my video here where I go over the best careers for the future. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, all the best.